Welcome to this overview of Dynamo's API. We would be going over some use cases, some best practices, and some pitfalls. Before we begin, I would highly advise you to go over Dynamo's administrative panel and most importantly, the entities and fields section of it. You can do so by jumping into the Dynamo admin panel and then going into entities and fields. And then in here, you have all the entities and respectively all the fields within them. Today, we'll be focusing on contacts, companies, activities, documents. So I would look at the contact entity now so that you can see what an entity looks like. An entity has many fields with many field types. Um, and you can explore the field types by creating new and then looking over all the types and all the relevant options that you can set on them. First thing you need to do is get an API key. You can do so by clicking on your user settings, then going into preference and API keys and generating a key. Now you do need to be careful who you do this as. If you do this as the admin, um, it is little surprise that the key itself will have ultimate power over everything in the system. I would highly advise you to not do this. Create a dedicated user for API operations and limit that user to only the entities and the fields that you want that key to have access to. Now that we have the key, the first place we want to take a look at is our API webpage, and it is located under api.dynamosoftware.com. There are examples here. You have all the endpoints. You have the bulk endpoints. You have entity endpoints for manipulating entities. There's a search and view collection as well. And each of these, when you click in them, has a fairly good description on what it will do and what it needs in order to do so. The first place we would like to look at is we would like to list all the entities in the system. We would do so by paging the entity endpoint with a GET request. We would be passing our API key, and let's see what happens when we do so. So what Dynamo did just now is it gave us all the entities in the system. Now notice that you have the entity name and then you have the entity name underscore some other entity. These are the bridge entities used to relate entities in the system. So allocation can be related to fund, index, investor account. You get the idea. And this can be done so via these bridge tables. The bridge tables contain two IDs of entity A and entity B. And as long as you insert those two IDs, the system knows the two are related. So now that we have all the entities in the system, we would like to focus on companies and fields and contacts. Um, so let's explore the contact entity and look at its schema. So we page the schema for the contact entity. That's done by saying /entity/contact/schema. Again, all this is on the Swagger page here on the API. Here we go. This is the entity I am paging /entity name schema. So now that I've paged the schema for the contact, we have the following response. It says what the name of the entity is, what its identity field is, uh, and then all the properties that it has. Each field describes what it is, what type of field it is it required, is it not, size, and other properties as well. As you scroll down, you will get into more advanced fields, such as reference fields, and so on. Again, it is important that you understand these different field types so that you can handle them. Now that we've explored the schema, let's see if um, we have any contacts in the system now. So we would list all the contacts. We would call /entity/contact, and behold, we have a total of 2 contacts now. Now, the headers we've sent are the headers that are defined in the documentation of the API. We're providing our key. We are saying which columns we would like to see by including their names. Very important point, do not use labels in here in the X columns. Always use the field names or the database names of the fields. Why? Because labels change, field names do not. So again, always use the field names, not the field labels when you're defining which columns you would like to see for an entity. Now, Dynamo has returned the two objects, and in addition, it has described the columns we've requested um, as object type and IDs, meaning a company as a reference to a company entity. Its schema name is investor, and its ID is XYZ. Um, so again, these are the special fields that I was referring to previously, where you need to familiarize yourself with the schema so that you can handle these properly, or understand what Dynamo is sending you back when requesting these. Now, it is possible to include special characters in the column names. Here's an example of how to do that. I would advise you against that because special characters make it harder for the support team to understand what is what. Uh, with that in mind, if you do have to use special characters for whatever reason, non-Latin characters, for example, the way to do so is by passing a header called X columns encoded, set it to true, and then the X columns, instead of specifying the names of the fields, you need to take all the names, such as we did previously. Let's take a look at the previous example. Here we had all the names. So you need to take this value here and encode it using base 64 and then pass that as the X columns value. So again, if you do have special characters in the names, encode them base 64 and then make sure you tell the API that you're doing so by saying X columns encoded is true. Now, here's a quick example. I have a field in the system that includes some non-Latin characters. And again, its name is encoded along with all the other fields that I'm requesting. And the system is able to parse that and provide a response to me. So if you do have this case, this is how to handle it. Let's begin to create some entities and we'll create a contact. The way to do so, again, you would reference the entity page and you would look at the post and the put endpoints. Both will yield similar results. We would focus on the post. Difference is the put will update and create, whereas the post will always create. So these are the parameters for the post on creating an entity. Our example is a contact. His first name is Bubba, last name is Smith, works at Dynamo Software, and we would be saying that it's the contact type is internal. Now, both company name and contact type are actually reference field, and they could be specified as objects, or they could be specified as strings. The API is smart enough to figure this out. So if you are lazy or you don't have the IDs on hand or don't feel like paging them, you can always pass the string value as opposed to the object, and the API will handle this case. All right, so now that we have our requests set up correctly and the proper headers, we would be creating our contact. So let's see what happens with Bubba. Bubba was just created. Response is success is true. And along with the success, the API will return the object it just created. So you'll be able to see exactly what happened. Now, here's what I mentioned just a few seconds ago. If you pass a reference field as a string, the API is smart enough to convert that to an object. All right, so we've created Bubba. Let's create a company as well. So we're going to create a dummy company called Big Bucks Inc. Amazing investment firms with lots of capital, right? So we're going to create this one as well. Again, API says all is well. Here's your data, and this is its ID. Last but not least, we will create an activity. And again, you, as long as you know what the schema looks like, you can create an activity just like you create anything else. So we create an activity, and here's our activity. This is the ID for the activity. Now, how would we relate um, Bubba, for example, to an activity in the system? Meaning, when you get into Dynamo and you search, let's get rid of this dummy here, and we find Bubba, we need to somehow relate this contact to an activity in the system. Uh, Meaning we can create one by hand. Great chat. Or we can relate Baba to one via the API. So let's do so. Now that we have the two IDs of the contact and the activity, we can relate the two by paging the contact underscore activity endpoint and passing the two IDs. So we would pass the contact ID and we would pass the activity ID. So we would do this request, success is true. Let's see if that is true. Let's go back to the application. We're under the contact and let's refresh the activities to see if what we did worked. And yes, it did. Here it is. Our activity that we previously created has been related to the contact. How can we effectively search in Dynamo via the API? I mean, you can always page all entities of type contact and get all of them, but that's not very functional and it's not very optimal to say the least. So you can do a few things here. First and foremost, you can create a search in the UI via the advanced search. And you can say, I would like to see contacts whose company name is Big Bucks Inc., right? So I would request this. And we're not getting any hits. Why are we not getting any hits? Let's see if we get any hits for Dynamo software. Okay, here we go. We did get hits. Okay, so this search here, let's assume this is something you'd like. It has meaning to you. The easiest way to convert this to an API query is via the API query button. So you will hit this button and behold, the system will give you the whole query and you can just copy and then subsequently paste it in here. And we'll do a search now. And behold, we got 2 hits, just like we did in the UI. Here we go. Here on top, you will see these links. If there's more than, um, if there are more results than the page size, and the page size is something that's controlled centrally um, by us at Dynamo. Um, Historically, it's been 50. We are migrating to 1,000 to achieve better throughput and yield less requests. But getting back, if there's more results than the page size, you will see the total here. Say it's 20,000. And then in addition to self, you will see a next right below it. And the next will be the URL to the next page. So in your code, you need to account for this, meaning if there's more results than the page size, you need to iterate through all the pages until there is no longer a next. Let's go over paging views in the application. Now, Dynamo itself has views. These are searches, um, such as this one, that have been saved. So one such view that I've saved for myself is investors. Now, this is a view that I've created, and the search conditions are simply give me all the contacts. And this view has been saved in the system. Now, to get a list of all the views in the system, you simply need to call view endpoint, and it will give you all the views. So if you just call the view without any arguments, uh, it will give you all the views, all the application views. The system does support SQL views as well. These need to be created by Dynamo for you. There's no way for you to create SQL views, but once you discuss with the support team and the client services team what you need, that can be created for you, and you can page it via the get endpoint, which is /view/SQL and the view name. Now, there is a special naming convention, which is outlined here. Again, these are views that Dynamo will create for you based on your requirements, but they can, again, effectively speed things up and get to just the data you need, as opposed to pulling tons and tons of data to get what you need. I will call the view endpoint and I will pass the path to my view. Now, how did I arrive at this path? Well, easy. If I call this view without the path, behold, it will give me all the saved views in the system. Let's call my view. Here it is. This is the view. It has a total of 3 results in it. And again, um, you can pass the API key. You don't need to pass anything in the body. This is all outlined in the documentation page. Here it is. And you get the results as defined by the view. One thing to note, when you do have a view, you do not need to pass the X columns. So again, to filter data and get to data quickly, you can do searches, you can do views, which are, again, searches but saved with a name, or you can do SQL views as long as we've created one for you, again, based on your requirements. So these are some of the ways that you can page data from Dynamo quickly and efficiently without hammering both the application instance that's hosting your data and your internal systems that are processing the data. One question that often comes up is, can you do bulk inserts? And the answer is yes, you can. The way to do bulk inserts is outlined in the bulk section of the API. So you can do a post, And in the body, you will pass what the key is for the bulk you're inserting, and then you can pass the items. We're going to create some contacts in bulk. So the body we would pass is this. Obviously, I've pre-populated some uh, data here. Let's call the bulk. Awesome. So success is true, and we get a link to um, the import task that was created. An import task is just like any other entity in the system. You can call it, see its fields. Obviously, they get updated dynamically as the import itself is processed. So let's call our import task URL that was again given to us in the previous step. And let's look at who the owner is, what the status is, and what the result is. So here we go. If we page all the contacts now, behold, we now have 13 contacts. Here they are, and you can see them in the UI as well. Investors is our view. Here they are. One thing that I have noticed is the fact that the company name was not picked up. In the UI, we're pulling company name. In the API, we're updating company. So company has become company name. Alrighty, let's do this. Send. Let's check the status. And it has completed. Let's see what we did here. Oh, awesome. I have the right key in my request, meaning I have my key defined as first name, last name, contact email. So the system is able to pick that out, and it updated all the company names for all the users. Last on the agenda is creating documents. For this example, I've chosen to create a logo. Again, the type of document is irrelevant. It's just simpler this way. I have picked a PNG file. And now one trick with documents is you need to make sure the content is passed as base64 encoded. This is what the body of the document looks like. Title, extension. Uh, you can review this on the API page under the post entity document. There's an example here. So I've converted my logo. It's in the proper format. Let me make sure it does not exist in the system already. Let's do advanced search. Let's do documents. And it's there already, so I'm going to get rid of it. Wait, pick the wrong one. Logo, delete, delete, okay. Alrighty, so the logo is not here anymore. Time to create it. So we call the endpoint. Success is true. It gives us the ID of the new created entity. Now let's relate one of our contacts. We'll relate Bubba to this image. So we'll paste the image ID. Now it is important to use the right bridge entities. If you use activity here, it will not relate the proper things. So we need to use document. Note that it will return success if you say activity here. And that is because this is simply a bridge entity that takes two IDs. These bridge tables do not enforce referential integrity on the database side. So it is important to note that. Make sure you use the right bridge table or bridge entity. Um, all right, success is true. So let's find Bubba now and see if, well, there we go. Bubba has access to the right document. It's a logo of Dynamo software. And this pretty much covers all the basic cases that you will encounter in the system. You can delete entities as well. And let's get rid of, who is this? Daniel Miller. All right, so Daniel, you are being deleted, my friend. All right. There is no reason to pass anything else. Body is none. Let's double check if that is correct. Yes. And boom. All right, we just removed Daniel Miller. I believe we've covered all the basic functionality that you would encounter on a day-to-day basis. Um, some tips, again, from a security perspective, roll the keys, roll them 3 months at most. Of course, you can leave them longer, but you're taking on a necessary risk because they could be exposed on your end, and that gives access into the system. Always, always, always use searches and views. Uh, Paging all entities is a last resort for you. You could do all kinds of scenarios. You can have custom fields that give you the ability to tag things you have processed and you haven't processed. For example, if if dates are not your thing and you want to tag items you've processed in another way, you can have a custom string field or a custom numeric field that you set to one or you set to true if it's a Boolean or whatever the case is, and then use it to figure out what has or hasn't been processed by your um, upstream and downstream code. Um, but again, don't ever page all the entities because that puts an unnecessary strain on the system. Um, and you're just moving bytes you don't really need. You're interested in very specific cases. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, our support team is available to answer them for you. And note that these examples will be provided to you as a package that you can download and play around with. Thank you and have a great day.